And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next meeting. Today we have Andreas with us. He will talk about Azure Static Web Apps, mostly. And we want to talk to thank our sponsors, the .NET Foundation, for enabling us to have this stream, and also to JetBrains, from which we'll be giving away 2 subscriptions to their products. So please ask your questions for Andreas in the YouTube chat, and we'll make sure that he gets them. And whoever asks for the first 2 relevant questions, we'll be giving away those subscriptions. So without further ado, Andreas, please, you can start.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Really nice to be here. Been looking forward to this. Really excited to be able to present, even though we know it's footy going on. And was expecting almost 0 users or viewers, but hopefully there are some more. Thank you to the .NET Foundation, supports the user group. The plan is that I will be talking about Azure Static Web Apps. Azure Static Web Apps is a new service. Only got like a year behind it. And the promise is, or the catchphrase is a modern web app service that offers streamlined full stack development from source code to global high availability. So let's go through it and see if it can really keep those promises. Quick word about myself. My name is Andreas Wänqvist, for you that haven't met me, residing in Sweden. I work for a company called Voyado, where my current title is tech lead, I think. Used to be cloud architect and senior developer and everything else that comes before that. I also do some web stuff on my spare time, open source. I'm a member since 2017 of the Aurelia core team. I know at least Miroslav have been dabbling in Aurelia for quite a long time, and hopefully some others of you have too. It's really nice web framework. Try it out if you have a new project coming up. Previous to Voyado, I used to work for a small company called Microsoft. I was in the Azure division. You can reach me with more questions if you have that. I'd love to talk web or Azure or static web apps or whatever. Just contact me on Twitter at mobilemancer. You please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Also have a blog, which is infrequently posted to, but it happens, at mobilemancer.com. So let's get into it. Azure Static Web Apps. It was released in preview at Build 2020, and it's now available in GA. It is a service for hosting static web apps. And the question is this something new? Is it super revolutionary? Is this something we haven't seen before? Well, it's actually just a collection of other services that work together as a really neat offering that has a low barrier to entry. It is combined CDN hosting for static web content, an Azure Function integration, which you can run inside your project, which is really, really smooth. GitHub integration for CI/CD, so you get some of that DevOps magic just for free if you're using GitHub Actions and GitHub, that is. It supports custom domains, which is really good. And it has some rudimentary but quite okay auth provider integrations. And all these are, of course, services that have been available before. It's nothing new, but it's collected or gathered in a way that makes it really easy to use, and it's a nice experience to work with as well. So CDN, the web hosting, really good. For those of you that have been around, Microsoft has a few offerings in Azure. It's Verizon, it's Akamai, and it's also Microsoft's own CDN hosting. Used to be difference in pricing for them. I think they're about the same, but there's, of course, small differences in how many endpoints they have, how many POPs. Microsoft used to lag behind there, but I think they're catching up. And I've tried some of the other ones before in other projects, and I must say this one is really, really good. I'm impressed by it. I haven't been that by the other offerings before, but I think they actually do a purge of the files and make sure that they redeploy as soon as there's a new build out. And that can actually take a while. Actually, I think the old documentation used to say, wait for 4 hours before you can be sure that all of the files are populated at the endpoints, which is, of course, a drag when you want to get content out the door ASAP. But this one is really, really fast. I, of course, suspect it's Microsoft's own that's behind it. And it's a pleasure to work with, actually. API. The API support is just an Azure Function app that you can have inside of the Static Web App project as part of it. Just stash it under the API folder or folder named API, and GitHub build actions, for example, if you use GitHub, will just see it, recognize it, figure out it's an API. You don't even actually have to tell it what language it is. Urix, the build pipeline that's behind it, will actually figure out what language it is and build it for you properly, which is kind of cool, in my opinion, at least. Do know that this is not your ordinary Azure Functions, though. It is restricted. Right now, the documentation says it supports .NET Core 3.1, Python 3.8, and Node 12. The documentation have been changed recently. It used to say also Node, I think, and PowerShell when it was out in just preview, but that seems to have been removed. I haven't tried if it still works. I suspect it actually does, but just that the documentation says it doesn't. But if you want to try those, feel free to do it, but there's no guaranteed support, I guess. Do know that this is a simple version of Azure Functions that only supports HTTP triggers. So that means all those other cool, funky stuff that you actually want to use Azure Functions for, handling other kind of events like from Event Hub, timer-driven, or even durable functions, whatnot, is not going to work here. So it's just for HTTP triggers. CI/CD support is actually available now for Azure DevOps, but the app must be created from the portal, and there's a small section where you can actually click Other as deployment details. This was not available when it first came out in preview. So then it was just GitHub. That was the only way to get your code up and running. So now you can click Other and actually choose Azure DevOps. You don't get those fancy bells and whistles that you actually get with GitHub, but at least it's an option now. I was actually quite, well, not upset, but disappointed when they didn't support Azure DevOps from the get-go in the preview. So it's nice to have, definitely, for all those that have a lot of code in Azure DevOps. CI/CD support with GitHub, it's much better. It is GitHub Actions that's created for the project actually automatically as soon as if you have your code in GitHub and you create an Azure Static Web App from it, then they will actually start talking. There will be a token created in GitHub, which will be able to, or which will be used to authenticate you and the deploys into Azure. And that means that as soon as you push code or you do pull request, there is going to be an automatically triggered build in the action, and it will also push the code for you to your instance, which is really cool. Staging versions makes things even better. That's if you create a branch and push some code to it, and then you create a pull request, then the GitHub action will actually create a staging version, a staging setup for you. You will get a new address for that one, and you can actually just browse to that site and see that your bug fix or your new feature is working as you intended. And then when you finish the pull request, it dismantles that staging version and you're good to go. Actually, a really nice feature. I wish I had that for all the pull requests going through our company branches all day. Do note though that if you're using the free version here, there's a free version and a paid tier. We'll get into that and pricing and everything else later on. But if you are running the free version, there's a maximum of 3 staging environments available. And that can be overwhelmingly little if you're a big team. But if you're just a one-man or a two-man shop, then it's probably fine, right? However, there's another caveat. That is that GitHub and Dependabot, which are super cool features, of course, checks your dependencies, make sure there's no security leaks or anything. And when an important security update is released, Dependabot will actually create a pull request for you into your repository with updated dependencies. And that pull request will create a staging environment. Which means that if you're not touching your app for, well, it depends on how many packages you have and how many leaks there are found, of course, but it could be that you come back and you try to push on code to pull request and you sit and wait for it to build and it doesn't build and create a staging version as it usually does, then make sure to check if Dependabot has actually created 3 staging versions before. Because then you can't have a 4th and your build will actually result in an error as well, I think. Custom domains, really nice to have. This has probably been, it has been the most requested feature for Azure App Services since like the beginning of dawn of man, when dinosaurs roamed the earth and were just aching to get free SSL certificates and support for custom domains in an easy way. It does finally come to app services as well. And it's here in Azure Static Web Apps as well. Really good, really good. One new thing that wasn't there in the preview is it actually supports Apex domains now, which is even more epic. For those of you that doesn't know what that is, it's just also nicknamed naked domain. That is, for example, mobilemancer.com without www in front of, just https ://naked.domain.com. That's an Apex domain or naked domain. It's been doable before with some tricks and hacks, but maybe not super encouraged. And this, however, requires a couple of other hacks, which is that the DNS provider you have your domain registered with needs to support, I think it's text record and or CNAME in the root of your domain, which is not every domain registrar that actually supports. So check that out if you want to use that, because it could be an issue. Authentication providing. There's this rudimentary integration with a couple of authentication providers. Of course, really good, but this is more this authentication solution is not aimed at you having a business to consumer app where you have 3 million customers and you want to store everyone's credentials in that solution. It's actually only 25 users, I think, in the free version that are supported. So this is, think of it like a super simple way of giving access to your site admins, perhaps. And there's a couple of supported out-of-the-box authentication providers, and that's Azure Active Directory. No surprise there. Got GitHub and Twitter, and it used to say in the documentation Facebook and Google. It is removed right now. And the funky thing is that the integration is still there. So you can still see it, you can access it, you can use it, but it's not documented. And I don't know if that means that support is going away or if it's just a documentation fail. So use it with care. Oh, an important caveat. All providers are enabled by default. We're going to look at that in the demo later on. But that means that if you know the route of one of these, you can access the routes for all the other ones as well and send authentication requests. Although you will not authenticate the user if you haven't created the user with a role, that's actually important. But it's still, it can be, they can be annoying to have accessible. So do know that. And the docs. The doc says that when you grant consent to an application as an end user, the application has access to your email address or your username, depending on the identity provider. And then I hooked up Twitter and this happened. I don't know if that's too small. Can you see that?
We can see it, yeah.
Basically says Twitter would like to access everything you own. It would like to drive your car and rename your children. That's about what you're accepting to. It's every consent they have and then some, which is of course kind of scary. But I don't think your end users will see that. I hope not. I hope that was just a first click to get the identity set up properly. But you might want to check out so that you don't scare your customers away with it if you decide to let customers in there. Managing Auth is made through the portal. I don't know if there's any way to do it through the CLI yet or by scripting. You create an invite and then you set specific roles on the invite, and you can also change the roles after the invite if you wish. And you can also decide to remove users later on and just use the portal for that as well. It can be quite good to know that One of the hard things with keeping users around is that you often want some kind of unique ID for them, depending on whatever solution they sign in with. It can be a hassle to keep track of them, since maybe email is not the best unique ID, since it can be changed, lost, hacked, etc. And there is an ID created for the users, but as soon as if you remove a user and add them again, it might be under another or with another provider. Say you switch from Twitter to Facebook, or actually just from Twitter remove the user and then you decide to let them in again and create an invite via Twitter again, they will have different IDs. So how do we define who can see what and actually use these roles that we set the users or assign the users? Well, we use routing rules document. It's just a JSON document that helps us handle authentication scenarios where we specify which routes certain roles can access. You can also use that same document actually for route rewrites, and for example, you can use it to block some of those auth providers if you don't want those there, and you can do rewrites. For example, say I try to log in, but I'm not authenticated. Well, then you can rewrite that route to redirect to a login page, for example. Learning resources. Turns out there's a whole heap of learning resources out there from Microsoft. Learn modules, I hope you've seen these. These are really cool, interactive. There are modules out for most JavaScript frameworks. Fortunately, not Aurelia, which is a shame. Also Gatsby and pure vanilla JavaScript. And there are tutorials available, so not so super hands-on, but still really good tutorials for Blazor, Next.js, and Nuxt.js. Also for Gatsby, Hugo, Vue, Press, and Jekyll. If you're not familiar with these, it's static website generators. Gatsby is that React-based, I think. Hugo is written in Go. It's super fast. It's quite impressive. VuePress, based on Vue. And Jekyll is, I think that is Ruby-based, right? Someone in the chat can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about these. I haven't tried them all, unfortunately. There's also a GitHub community projects repository with loads of community projects. Here you can find a lot of other cool frameworks and generators. Dockersaurus, Mongoose, Svelte, Scully, and a whole heap more. And also, if you do something really cool yourself, commit to the community projects repo. Additional stuff to be mindful of. You probably want logging if you use the API, Functions API. An easy way to do that is to use application insights. Not sure most of you have run into that service or not. It's quite good for limited amounts of logs. If you're doing something that gets millions of hits, your Azure Static Web website might be free or very, 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 very close to free, but logging can be quite costly or spendy. I think the correct word is. Right now, the service, Azure Static Web Apps, that is only available in 5 regions. And that is Central US, East US 2, West US 2, East Asia, and West Europe. Pricing. There is pricing and, of course, quotas tied to those pricings. The free version has the very, very, very nice price of free. And it actually includes quite a lot for that. 100 gigabytes of bandwidth, which is per month, that is, per subscription though. So if you have 2 apps, then they will share that quota. Still quite good, depending on what kind of blog or website you run. I know my personal blog will probably handle 5 years of traffic with 100 gigabyte. So that's quite good. It's also the same that's included in the standard version. The standard version costs about €7.50 per application per month, which is a really fair price as well. I think that last time I checked Azure App Service with, I think it's B1 tier you need, or tier that you need at least to be able to have a certificate, will cost you somewhere around €10 a month.
Andreas, can we jump in with some questions now?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, since we have a few relevant ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first one was from Nicola. He asked that at 6:01, so just at the start, and you are just talking about this. So what's the difference in pricing between classic app service and static web apps?
Well, difference in pricing. The difference is super relevant. I was talking about that. What you need for the app service, I think it's a B1 tier to be able to run with the certificate. And as soon as you have a certificate up and running, you're like on the same tier as an Azure Static Web App, although it's just not as quick. And that will cost you around €10 a month, I think. So this ends up, if you're running the standard version, €7.50 a month. So some euros below for about the same. But you can run the free one if you don't need all the bells and whistles that standard offers you. You can use the free version. I think I was just about to say that the thing that will be the deal breaker is that if you have bandwidth overage, meaning if you pass those 100 gigabytes a month per your entire subscription for Azure Static Web Apps, then the documentation currently says that we cannot longer service your application, it says. So it doesn't say what will happen even. That's why I marked it with the skull, because if you manage to rack up some bandwidth overage in the free app, then you're in deep waters, right? But unless you do that and free suits you, super cool. Big difference compared to Azure App Service.
Okay, thanks. So we have this one from Jose. Is the Apex domain support a new feature? And also he kind of modified the question to what's new after the preview of Azure Static Web Apps.
Yeah, in preview, Apex domain wasn't available, so it's been. I'm not even sure it was available when it first rolled out into GA, but it is available now. So if you haven't looked at it for 6 months or so, then it's really new.
Okay, thanks. We have another question from Nicola too. Are there any improvements regarding SPA routing, or we still need to provide instructions for the underlying server?
I'm trying to dissect the question. Well, if I understand the question correctly, SPA routing is well, not so much a server issue. It's your client-side app, right? That handles.
Mm-hmm.
So you define your routing in your Angular app or whatever it might be, right? And that is still going to be the same. I think you're referring to the routing JSON configuration that I briefly skimmed over before. And what that will do is actually just it will keep tabs on what requests will end up on the server, which isn't really server, but whatever will request the endpoint that you have, right? So, for example, you can use it to check request that comes in and goes down to your Azure Function API.
Okay, thanks. And one more question: does the pricing include cost of the storage account itself?
Yes. There is no actual storage account that you can see here. So everything is baked into one. All you see is just an Azure Static Web App instance. I'll show you in the portal real soon. So it's just more service. It's a lump of things, but all these things that we're going to talk about in the pricing and quotas slide in just a few minutes will describe what you get in this package, right?
Yes, so we had one question, but you already explained that.
Yeah, it means you're
mean?
doomed. But yeah, so since the wording is so weird about bandwidth overage in the docs, right? It might be that they evict your app, and you don't want that. It might be shut down. It might be terminated. We don't know. So please, if you actually yourself find out what that skull actually entails, please give me a ping because I'm dying to know.
Okay, and yeah, just one more question, also from Nicola. Are there any improvements for CI/CD on Azure DevOps, or we still have to use Azure CLI?
That's a broader question. If you're talking about the CI/CD for just deploying Azure Static Web Apps, well, I'm guessing it's the same as for all Azure DevOps. It is nothing new is happening there. I don't work for Microsoft. I can speak for them, but you can clearly see that there's a lot of focus on GitHub and GitHub Actions, etc., and some connections I've used to follow. They moved from the DevOps org to GitHub, so I'm thinking Azure CI/CD, or rather Azure DevOps CI/CD, is probably going to look the way it does for the foreseeable future. You can use the Azure CLI. You can also use PowerShell if you prefer that, but I'm not sure it's a better solution.
Okay, thanks. So some of the people are anxious to see demos, so I'll let you continue now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so a little bit more about quotas, what you get for your money here. There's a different set of custom domains, 2 for free, 5 for standard. Still not quite sure why you need so many domains for an app, but it's good to have. SSL certificates are free and they're managed for you, which is super cool if you used to handle that yourself with Let's Encrypt and those refresh scripts. That were not Microsoft supported before. No, so it could be quite a hassle, right? Authentication solution we discussed briefly. You can have 25 users with up to 50 defined roles. Same for both of these services. For the standard version, it says in the documentation you can have custom authentication. Well, whatever that means, they don't document it, at least not when I checked a couple of hours ago. Private link you can use in the paid version, which is of course super good, and the necessity if you have all your company stuff defined in a private network in Azure. Storage. The most exciting thing here is probably that was the storage question that arose before. There is a storage account behind this, of course, but it's hidden. You can't access it. You can't see it. You can't get to it in any way. It's locked down. It is where you store your app, and it is, I bet, by conventional Microsoft storage and CDN ways, it is a storage account that's actually tied to a CDN endpoint. And that is holding all your information, your files, images, everything for your site, right? So what you get there is you have a maximum of 500 megabytes in free, which is quite a lot. That's a big site, in my opinion, especially when it's just a static web app, no server-side code. Well, maybe some small API functions, but that's not a lot, right? 2 gigabytes available in standard. And what is really important to see here is that there's a cap on deployment size. And that means that, say you have a travel blog, say you have several hundreds of really large images, and that is actually baked into your blog, and you use a static blog generator like Hugo, for example. Depending on how your build is set up, you're going to build and bake this entire lump. That is your static website, right? And force it up for every commit, every change. You're going to bake everything and push it. So that means that deployment size looks huge to me. That's used to small apps. But if you have a lot of images, a lot of static content, you bake everything together in one go. Well, 250 megabytes, that could be a deal breaker for you with the free solution. Azure Functions, for the free one, it's managed. You don't have any option, just use one inside of your Azure Static Web App, and it's the small restricted one. For the paid version, it says you can bring your own. There is no real good documentation of that I've seen, though. But that would mean that you can use proper functionality in your Azure apps, like event triggers, timers, whatnot. And then those really cool pre-production or staging environments that you can only get access to when you're using GitHub. You have 3 available for the free tier and 10 for the standard. So let's say I want to build this for myself instead. What would that mean? If I picked together all the pieces and built this out of other Azure services, what would we end up with? Well, you would need an Azure Functions app. You would need storage to host your blog or app. Deploy size wouldn't really matter for that one. As far as I know, it's only bandwidth account. And going into Azure, it's I think it's 0 as cost still. It's just traffic out that costs. So CDN traffic comparable to what you would get for in the Azure Static Web App package will cost you, depending on where the traffic is going. You have some couple of cheap regions like I think it's Americas and Europe that are the least expensive, and then you have Brazil that's like cost 5 times as much. So that'd be between 7 to 20 euros. Euros. And say the average is 10 euros. And Azure B2C AD for collecting all your users. And that would mean you could have way more than 25. And as for the Azure Functions, well, the cost is the same as the Azure Static Web Apps. Your first million calls are free. So you'd end up with, depending on where your traffic goes, say around 10 euros for the solution if you built it yourself. I run a small application that I set up before the Azure Static Web Apps solution was conceived, where I arranged everything myself, where I run Aurelia weekly. And I think that costs me 0.04 euros a month. And that's just because there's no traffic. So it's really, really super cheap if you don't have a lot of traffic. So say you want to start playing with this and you haven't done anything before, you get no experience, then I would recommend you to get a GitHub account if you haven't got that. An Azure account, so you can play around with the application. It's really good. If you work for a company that gives their developers MSDN, I don't know if it's called MSDN longer, but if you have a My Visual Studio account, you can go in there and see if you can get some free Azure credits or a free Azure account as well. To work with Azure Static Web Apps in Visual Studio Code, I recommend a couple of extensions you can get. Big one is Azure Account, where you handle the connection to Azure. And there's an extension out, I think it's still in preview, for Azure Static Web Apps. And there's also an extension for Azure Functions, if you want to use that to create your API. Later on, if you want to see what we build during demo time, later on, you can just hit my GitHub repository, and there's a demo-static-web-apps-BLbit available. Well, you can get the code, and I'll also see to it that the presentation ends up there. So you can get all the links for the documentation and examples and demos that I showed you before. So now finally demo time. Just took 10 minutes longer than what you expected. So we'll start out from this very simple repository. Practically naked. All we have is a license, pretty README file, and a favicon. And I have already prepared. I hope everyone can see the fonts. We concluded before we started that I have too large of a screen and everything was super small. So we tried to blow all the fonts up as much as we could. So please let us know if it's not visible to you. So I already cloned the repository down to my disk here. All right. So we start up Visual Studio Code. See what we have. All those pretty points, right? And we create an index.html file. Be super simple. Oh, updates. I'll try to remove this. So it's just some styling, and then this was really small. Can you see this? It looks okay, right? Super simple, just a couple of buttons, logging in, logging out, admin page, or a link from the admin page. And that's about it. There's also some super small, simple JavaScript to get information about the current user. Let's save that and say we would like to create an Azure Static Web App for this. The easiest way is to use Azure extension. Let us close this and this. So here, this is supposed to say static web apps. There we see it. So just, of course, it's not signed in. That's super cool. Let me sign in here real quick. So signed in. Real funny part is that I actually double checked the demo 10 minutes before we started the stream, but just as usual when you're doing demos, right? So now I'm signed in, and I can just start a static web app. And of course, I need to commit that, and I'm good with that. So did you push that as well? Yes, it did. So what do we want to call it? Well, the default name is quite okay. And we are not using any kind of framework, so we'll call it custom. Should be like vanilla.js or something, but location of application code. Well, everything is in the root for us. And here is the tricky part. If you have some kind of SPA framework, you're going to have build artifacts. You're going to go through a build setup of some kind, and there's going to be a lot of artifacts in some directory, be it build, be it whatever, right? But we don't have any. It's just an index file in the root, super simple. So we'll just say root here as well. And it's creating the new web app for us. Here we go. Done. Look at this. So, information saying successfully created the new static web app for us, and also GitHub Actions is building and deploying our app. It will be available once the deployment completes. So, super cool. Close that and we can see what happened. So we actually get some new code here, right? Check this out. So this is actually the CI/CD build pipeline that's created for us. And we don't have to mess around with that. You often don't have to muck around with that. It's only if you run some kind of complex setup where you have a lot of build artifacts and you decide to move the directory that we gave in the beginning for where your build artifacts is, or where you store your code or whatnot, then this is the file you need to go in and fix stuff in. But doesn't happen that often, so I can just lie here and simmer for a while. So if we check GitHub now, oops, sorry, wrong window here. Refresh this, we see we'll have the workflows directory here, right? And if we check actions here, we can actually see that it has triggered an action. Build and deploy took a full minute for us. Trying to scroll the page here, it doesn't work that one. There we go. Expand this and see all your build info, and this is where you of course get error logs, etc. if you have any issues. So this is quite funny. Rix will complain that there's nothing to build, but that's the way it goes, and it actually recognizes that there's no API location, so there's no Azure Functions app to be built. And it can't detect the language of the repository since there's no code in it. If we go into the Azure portal right now, you should be able to see a new resource group here created with the same name as the repository. In it is our static web app that was just created. So check it out. And there's an URL for it. You get some kind of cool random name. They're usually quite cute. Agreeable June. Well, not so sure. June is one of the best movies ever, right? So pretty good. If we try to open it, let's see. Oh, it's quite small, right? Expand it. Here's our demo page. That was all that was in that small index file. Not a lot of information here. You can try and get the user info. No user info available. That admin button doesn't work because there's no admin page, right? And we can't quite log in yet either. So let us let's create a branch first. So, new feature branch, and we're going to add an admin page. There we go. Ever so fast. It's just the same page as before. Same styling, same fonts is loaded. Nothing happened. It just says admin page and welcome. So let's do admin page. Like that. And we push it. Has no upstream branch, so we want to create that. Now, if we head over to GitHub, it's so big for me. I can hardly navigate because I don't recognize the UI. So we'll say that we had a new push to a new feature branch, right? Super cool. Do you want to compare the pull request? Well, yes, please. I would like that. And there are no collisions. We can automatically merge it. So sweet. Create a pull request. And then wait a second. Oh, look at this. So this is the GitHub action that's actually kicking in. And this is going to create that staging environment I talked about before. This takes a minute. So is there any new questions, Miroslav?
think there was one which we didn't go through. Let me just check.
Shoot.
I think no, this one is okay. Yes, this one from Jose. So is there any limitation on the number of CI/CD in the free tier?
It's just that you can only have 3 pull requests open with 3 staging environments, and I think it will actually break your build if you try to create a 4th, which is kind of nuts, because I would be totally okay with having 50 pull requests open, but only 3 of them having a staging environment, right? But I tried a couple of weeks ago, and it actually broke my build when I tried to create a 4th one. So I'd say that's a big blocker. Otherwise than that, I'm not sure. You probably know that, and probably why you're asking the question. But they recently had a big crackdown on the amount of free minutes you got for GitHub Actions. It used to be unlimited before, right? But then some crafty, sneaky hackers realized that you can actually mine Bitcoin in GitHub Actions. So they started to abuse that, and of course they have to ruin the fun for all of us that's not breaking the law. So as far as I know, there are no time limits for Azure Static Web App builds, which is probably what the question was about.
Okay, thanks.
So we can see here that our kind GitHub Actions bot commented that it's ready. Your stage site is ready. So visit here, and you can see that this has actually a -1 on the ending. So if we open that one instead, remember we hit admin here before and it was not found. And oh, sorry, small again. If we click admin on this one, so this is the staging site. Remember, it had -1. This is the original. It's like no dash. You can also see this one, Azure Static Apps.net. That's like the real thing, real McCoy. And this says region as well on the staging apps, right? So if we click admin here, we have an admin page. Super cool, right? So we're quite fine with that. Merge it, ship it, looks good. Oops, I keep clicking the wrong browser. Sorry about that. Yeah, so let's switch over to our main branch. And we'll sync that as well. And we need to finish the pull request. Wrong again. So here we go. Merge the pull request as well. So I confirm merge. And I can delete the branch. There we go. Should be okay. Sync it into Visual Studio Code. It should be in the main branch. And yes, here it is. So let's check out the user credentials. So all those app integrations are actually available under a path that starts with the ./auth / then Twitter, for example, or /Facebook. And the way you assign users to roles is right now in the portal. Can't script it as far as I know. You go into your static web app and go to role management, right? Click invite. Here you can select your preferred authentication provider. In our case, I'll go with Twitter and try to invite myself. if I try to generate, I can't because this is quite sneaky. You will always get the roles of, or you will get authorized and authenticated when you go through a successful authentication. But you need to enter something else here, right? So I think contributor or comma reader is just a proposal, but to me it looks like that box is already filled in. I shouldn't be having to care about it, but I clearly can't generate it, and it's actually this box. I'm guessing it's slightly less intensive color-wise than the other ones are, but this is the issue I can't go on. So let's give me admin role. Now you see, generate lights up. I get an invite link. Just copy that one. And then your invited user. Go to the link. It says you need to grant consent. Of course, we trust this app, and it passes me along, right? So if we check my user info, you can see I got an ID. Twitter authenticated me, and it's saying I am anonymous, I am authenticated, and I'm also an administrator, which feels pretty weird that I'm anonymous when I'm actually extremely known, since I'm the only one that has admin and I have been invited through the UI, but I'm still anonymous. Oh well. So admin page, it was accessible before, right? Is there any way of locking that one down so it's only accessible for someone who's in the admin role? Well, yes, there is. The way we do that is by just creating a JSON file. We define our settings like this. So I'll commit that first so we get the build going, and then we can talk about it. There we go. Send that one off to the cloud. So here, this static web app.config.json file, just the ordinary JSON, right? It contains route configurations, and you can create navigation fallbacks, and you can create response overrides. So what are routes? Well, for example, say that this kind of quirky authentication route I want to go to, I want to hit that just saying /login. Well, I will do that with the rewrite. Say I want to only allow things under the admin, under /admin even, for those that are allowed in a certain role. I can do that. So here we're saying that the admin page we had are just going to be allowed for people with the admin role. I do, for example, not want people to log into my app with GitHub Actions, with GitHub. I don't even want them to be able to see the GitHub login page, which would otherwise surface. If you go to this route, you will be able to see all of these login pages, even though if the user tries to log in, they won't get any role associated like admin, for example, but they would still end up with being logged in. So they would get a user info object like the one we saw before. It would have the anonymous and authenticated roles, weirdly enough, even though you didn't invite them explicitly, right? So always depend on those extra roles that you create for verifying roles against routes. The navigation fallback is just you write something that's not acceptable, like humptydumpty.html. Well, say it rewrites and send you back to index.html. Response overrides is if I get certain HTTP code like 401, I'm not authenticated, then make sure we redirect that person to the /login page. I don't know how many times I'm going to click that today. I'm sorry about that. So let's see if we have a build going on with actions. Auth settings, it's actually done. It should be deployed, right? So we can close our former staging environment. Oh, that was staging. I apologize. Let's close that one and open it from here. So this is the page, user info. That was my old user info, still there. Let's log me out. So now I have no correct user profile, right? It shouldn't allow me to access admin. But you saw it triggered a Twitter login, right? So instead of saying you're not allowed, what happened was I got to 401. I was not authorized. It redirected me to login. And since I previously gave Twitter authentication rights or consent, it actually logged me in with Twitter. So if we check that, again, if we check user information here, right, we can see that, yes, I'm actually logged in with my Twitter credentials. And since I'm in the admin role, I should be able to click at the admin button here, right? And I can do that. If we go back and we test login with Facebook, now I didn't show you that before, but this would have been accessible. See, let's clear my user information and try to log in with Facebook. Now with the route rewrite we had, that should say that is not possible, right? Give us a 404. So that was the, check this one out. That directed this, or rather the user tried to access Auth login /Facebook and got to 404 instead. And you can also define your own pages for these common HTTP codes. Just so you know, I haven't showed that before, but it's really easy. Just, I think you name the document like 44.html and it will show them instead. So let's see. Oh, that's the wrong one. Well, how are we doing on time? We have a couple of minutes more, or?
Yes, please continue.
Yeah, no new questions?
At the moment, no.
Cool. So a small caveat here is that if we go to role management, we see my user, and I click it, and I try to remove that. Oh, it could not be empty. Say X. So, well, not sure. I could even delete my user, I think. It's even better. So, refresh. There's no user. I am gone. No longer in the system. I have 0 rights. And I click the link. We open up the application. And we try to open the admin page. So show of hands, I can see your hands, but who thinks we're going to see the admin page? versus who thinks we're going to get unauthorized? Do you see any hands, Miroslav?
Not at the moment, but please know that the stream is, I think, 15 seconds after the.
Yeah, so you probably guess that I'll get unauthorized, right? Click admin and I get the admin page. What the bloody, what's going on? Get the user info. Oh, I still get it. Looking good. Still admin. How is that even possible? Well, it is the magic of caching. So static web apps, one of the things with static files is super aggressive caching, right? It's going to tell your browser that some files are never going to expire unless told otherwise. So still got user info. Oh, that should be cleared. We with Twitter. Get the user info. Oh, that's epic. I shouldn't be admin now, right? I shouldn't have a role. Oh. But it is probably lagging on Microsoft side or the Azure side even more. No, I can't demo that. Sorry, it's going to take some time to propagate that. But do know that if you change a role for a user or even remove them, and they have your application open and they click around the wall, it's going to be static information. It's going to be cached unless you force a refresh. So you probably need to clean the app or instruct the user's browser to remove the cache somehow and basically deploy a new version. And then next time they open your app, well, it's going to be, everything is going to be refreshed and reloaded, and then you won't have the admin page available in your cache. And you won't hit it when the user requests it. If your browser has cached it and you click admin, well, it's just going to check the browser cache, right? So it's not going to go down to the server and look at the routes JSON file and see that, well, you're not supposed to access admin. It's just going to be able to show you what's already there. But that entire scenario, of course, revolves around the fact that you usually had that user in a position of power or role where they could see things, and then you somehow diminish that, and it will still be seen until you refresh or force a refresh.
We have another question.
Shoot.
So Jose asks, is it using Microsoft Identity under the hood?
If you use the connection to, oh, well, wait. I was going to answer the wrong thing. It's a hard question. What is Microsoft Identity? If you're thinking about the Azure AD connection, there's of course, an option for that. Available from the get-go, it is AAD is the route. So, but it's still just the same thing, same requirement constraints, like you can have 25 users, that is it. So I suspect that there's some kind of epic, large, grand scheme shared AD behind a lot of Azure Static Web Apps that is managed by Microsoft, and that's why you can't access it, and that's why it's so restrained in how many people you can have. Then Azure AD. Well, there's more parts that I guess not quite sure about the connection code that's beneath the hood that enables you to actually receive and handle the tokens from GitHub, Google, Facebook. That's probably the same code. You can't access it in any way though. It's not open for you to pry open and pick apart if you wish, unfortunately. Hope that's answer to the question.
Yep, thanks.
So we had time until 1930, right?
Well, yes, if you have something else to add, please do.
Yeah. Not sure if you want to see it. One important thing that I was supposed to show as well is SSL. It's kind of super important, right? Custom domains. So it's really easy. Just add and then the domain name, and then you will get to validate and configure, and of course you need to enter a text record type at your domain and blah blah blah. And after this propagates through DNS, it will validate, and then it will create a certificate for you behind the scenes and set it up. Super smooth. Big props to whoever fixed it over at Microsoft. It's been long overdue, especially with Apex domains, right? I think it's super cool. I don't have anything more planned. If you want to, we could set up a quick API if people want to see how to do that. So you have a backing API for the function app.
Well, I guess that would be okay. We also have one question.
Shoot.
From Virzak. How do these services compare to AWS static sites and other cloud alternatives?
Azure Static Web Apps is far superior to everything else out there because, no, just kidding. I think it's the same. Everything is the same. I mean, there's one little thing here and one little thing there that the services don't provide, but let's keep it real. If your company has all your things in AWS, then you don't want to go deploy stuff in Azure just for the fun of it. If your company is a Microsoft-based shop, well, it doesn't make super sound decisions to deploy over in Google, perhaps. So just go with what you feel like. I don't think there's any major difference to anything. It's just probably the amount of support you get, or rather community support, I suspect, because the AWS equivalent, it's been long for longer. There's more community support code out there. There's probably more people working with it. However, I think that if you get into Azure Static Web Apps, then not that many people have started. So it's like really, they're attentive on the Microsoft side. You get good support if there's anything going on. Don't know much about Google, unfortunately, but I'm sure it's equally good.
Okay, thanks.
So should we create an API? That is, well, you should say anything is super simple with computers. We all know it's not, but it's relatively simple. So we need, for this to be able to build, it needs to be in a folder called API. And not a file, of course, but a folder. Sorry about that. Here we go. All, and then you can create this function app in a matter of ways, of course. Easiest way, I think, is if you have the Azure Functions Visual Studio Code extension installed. Just Azure Functions, create new project. On that one, it's going to ask you where you want to host it, and it's going to be in the API folder we just created. Let's use C#, and we want .NET Core 3. Should be 3.1. Wonder more. Oh, strange. Let's call it HTTP trigger. Don't need to get fancy. We'll go with the defaults. So here we go. Created the API project for us. We need to resolve some dependencies if we want it, run it locally. Don't think we're going to do that, but it will remove the ugly squigglies at least. Done. So just let's give this a vote. I think. So there we go. And then we should call this, right? Let's. We can do it here. I think on the front page. I think I got some. This. Let's remove that and figure that as well. Under our user info. So this is just a simple function calling the route here, and we call it greeting, right? API/greeting, I think it was, and it's going to grab the response as text, and then it's going to log it out into the console, so nothing fancy. Hope this is up for it. It's a bit unrehearsed, but it's more fun that way, right? So we call it greeting, and that's API greeting. And so this, unless you pass something into this, it's just going to return a text response like this HTTP triggered function executed successfully, pass in a name or something if you want. But let's just see if we'll do a get against it and see what comes out, right? So let us commit our stuff. Oh, hey. Sorry about that. I'm not used to all these huge icons. So, new feature, API, really cool. Sync it. So let's hope everything worked out right. Let's check our actions. Well, it's already building. Look at that. Let's expand. And we'll see. Maybe this time we'll see it actually finds, hopefully, an API folder and starts building it. And also it should, we can hope that Oryx figures out what kind of question it actually, or language it actually is. It takes some time to build, unfortunately. Any more questions in the meantime?
Not at the moment.
So here we go. Oryx kicks off. I couldn't detect the language, but hopefully this is not the API, but the root of the app, which is still just an HTML file, right? Zipped artifacts, but is the API already built? Here we go. So it recognized that we have an API, right? In the API folder, recognized it was a .NET Core version 3.1 app, so all good so far. And finished uploading. Super good. So let's see. We have this one open. I know this is really small. Let's see if I can enlarge it. Just need to empty the cache and hard refresh first to get everything to work. This is our new button that unfortunately doesn't say anything yet. Let's see what happened here. I don't know if you can see this. Is it visible to you guys? So we clicked our new faceless button here. It sent off the API dash greeting request, right? Just to get the request. It got 200 OK back, and the preview is that same text I showed you there, that this HTTP triggered function executed successfully, pass in something or blah, blah, blah. So that's how easy it is to add an API to your Azure Static Web App. And kind of easy to set up the CI/CD build for it as well in GitHub, since everything just kind of works. Pretty cool, eh? So that's everything I got for tonight. If you guys got any more questions, I'm be glad to answer.
Great, thanks. At the moment, we don't have any more questions, but yeah, great presentation. Thank you. I really like the last part about adding APIs to this, since it really adds a power to everything.
Yeah, it does. I'm sorry I only spent 1 minute out of 90 minutes on that.
It's okay. The other parts are great too. This one was just my favorite. Okay, so yeah.
Just want to say, really appreciate that you invited me. Thank you very much. It was really great to be here. I'd love to come back and we could talk Azure Functions for a whole 90 minutes sometime if you would like, after summer, perhaps.
Sure, of course. Yeah. And hopefully we'll be able to see each other in person sometime.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yes.
That'd be so awesome. Yeah. Super
Okay,
cool.
So thank you a lot, and thanks for everybody watching. Thanks for Nicole and Jose. I sent them their subscriptions. They were the most the quickest and most active people in the chat, so well deserved. And so thanks everybody, and see you on the next meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.